Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Jess Ekstrom with me. Jess is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, entrepreneur, and her books, Chasing the Bright Side, Create Your Bright Ideas, and her newest book that is releasing in May is Making It Without Losing It. And one of the things I'm really excited about within Jess's story is when you find something you're passionate about, oftentimes you can find a following and people that follow that idea. So, Jess, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, to start with your journey, growing up, your parents had, I would say, traditional jobs. And then one day, your dad called a family meeting and had a conversation he wanted to talk with you guys about. So, talk a little about the family meeting, what came from that, and maybe the ideas that start swirling in your head.
Yeah, I remember when he called this family meeting and said, I want to quit my day job. I have this business I want to start and I want your support. And I just remember thinking, like, okay, cool. What's for dinner? Just did not have any kind of sense of what a big move that must have been for him. But then I saw him pour everything he had into this company, renovate our upstairs bathroom into his office, which was like very pre-working from home. No one was doing that.
Yeah.
Then my mom started working for him, and they built this business together. And I think I just had unknowingly had this front row seat of
Mm,
watching people go for it.
yeah.
And so I think when it became time when I had an idea for a company, I had this, experience to pull from where my parents never told me, like, start a business, do this, do that. But I had their example. And
Yeah.
I think not a lot of people maybe have had that front row seat of someone going for it. And so I feel like I just knew in that moment that that was like, I didn't even mean to plug the show, but knew in that moment where, um, oh, I have this opportunity to solve this myself instead of wishing or waiting for someone else to do it.
Mm, I love it. Now, as your family is growing, one unique curveball in your journey is other family members that had started businesses, and it's your senior year of school, and your
Uh,
parents say, "Don't watch the news today.
uh-huh.
We will talk about it when you get home." So, talk a little about this season of life and just some of those experiences and you know tough times and handling that.
Yeah. Yeah. Where we met, the lead different
Yeah.
experience, I had talked about, something that I haven't really shared a ton, which was this moment in high school where, yeah, my parents were off one morning and told me not to watch the news. We weren't really sure what was going on. And then come to find out that they had lost, all of their savings in Bernie Madoff in 2008. And then also Bernie was my mom's uncle.
Mm.
And so we had this really, really crazy, I don't even know what to call it, crazy season that I would say like we're still in after all these years
Yeah.
of trying to put the pieces together along a lot of other victims who were impacted by it. Um, but I think, it was I up until that point I didn't really have huge ambitions.
Mm.
And in that moment and afterwards, I think I was naive enough to be a little bit more bullish and curious instead of kind of falling back.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make something that I think in hindsight, I was really trying to almost counteract
Mm.
the bad with
Yeah.
something good. Um, and it was even the intention behind it was like maybe not the best place to start, like doing something that would maybe negate like this experience.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a really great experience that came from it.
Yeah. Now, you talked a little bit about your kind of entrepreneurial journey and just having your dad step into an entrepreneurial world, thinking about things differently. And you mentioned one day you were, I think, running and the cords kept getting stuck, and you go, "Gosh,
Yeah.
I wish that there was a way for the cords to not get tangled."
Yeah.
And you just talked about how that kind of conversation really open your mind into a different way of thinking about
Mhm.
problems. And I think that's really impactful, whether it becomes a business or not, right? But just thinking about problems in different ways. So talk a little bit about that story and yeah,
Mhm.
the new way of thinking for you.
Yeah, I think we've all had a moment where we're just, like, frustrated about something about, "Oh, why doesn't it go like this?" And for me, it was headphones.
Yeah.
And this was definitely pre-AirPods. This was definitely, I think, even pre-iPod, Walkman era with a, like, cassette tape, and my headphone cords kept getting tangled in a knot, and I was like, in middle school, I was like, "Dad, headphone cords should just, roll up like a slinky so they don't have to get tangled." And I was like, "I'm going to invent this just like you're inventing your business." It was right when he
Yeah.
started his business. And he sat me down and he was like, "That's already been invented, but I want you to keep thinking that way. Keep
Yeah.
thinking about how things could be done better or done differently." And I think that was just like this little permission slip that I still carry with me to this day of what isn't what always has to be.
Mm,
And if you see, it could be something as simple as a headphone cord, it could be something as big as injustice. But for you to look at the world through a lens that you can fix it kind of ignites this inner entrepreneur in all of us, no matter if you start a business or not, because at its core, it's really just about creating what you wish existed. And so that's what I try to do.
I love it. So, post high school, you make the decision to go to North Carolina State, and you meet somebody special at North Carolina State that might be a part of the life today. So, talk a little bit about how you and your future husband end up meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. I never get to talk about this. So, yeah, Jake, my husband, was he played football at NC State. I gave tours, I guess once a public speaker, always a public speaker. And we part of like the responsibility as a tour guide was taking recruits into the games and sitting with their family and answering questions about the university. And Jake and I had a big lecture class together, a communications class. And so I had seen him before, but there was like 200 students in it, so we had never talked. And then took my recruits to this game. I remember it was against the University of Maryland. We had a huge comeback and ended up winning. And and then so I took my recruits down to the locker room after a big win because I wanted them to see the team and all the
Yeah.
energy around it. And the team was like running in, and Jake was like, "Girl from comm class, what's up?" And gives me a high five, and the rest is history. 2 kids later, here we are.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Well,
It was fun.
in addition to meeting Jake while you're there, you did an internship with Disney and we're
Mhm.
working with Disney. And this really, kind of struck a chord with you while you were there was the fact that there were kiddos that wanted to have headbands on and that was a preference. So talk a little about, the time at Disney, what you realized and then where a business journey was going to lead from.
Yeah. So when I was at Disney, I was a PhotoPass photographer, and I would take a lot of what I had to do was taking pictures of kids that were there on their wish through the Make Wish Foundation, and I fell in love with it. And that was when I got back to school for my next internship. I interned at Make Wish, and that was when I really started to notice a lot of these kids that would lose their hair to chemotherapy would be offered wigs or hats, and a lot of them wanted to wear headbands,
Yeah.
and goes back to the like headphone story of looking for this solution and looking for places that provided headbands and couldn't find any. So I started a company called Headbands of Hope, and for every headband sold, we donate one to a child with an illness. Um, but again, it all just kind of came from this moment of looking for something that you wanted and not finding it is an opportunity for you to do something about it.
Amazing. Now, as you're coming up with this idea, I think there's certain businesses that have come at the business angle with the social cause, and it's gone really well. I think there's also this difficult element of running a business with a social cause because you say, well, gosh, I'm also going to be giving away a product. So I have to, price certain things accordingly
Mhm.
to, make up for the additional expense. So as you were starting, how did that come to be a true business for you? And what was the business model like? Did you have a clear cut design, or was it we're kind of winging it as we go?
I'm still winging it. It is, always figuring it out as we go. But the one thing that I was really interested in and curious about was, like, the founder of Tom's Shoes had spoken at my school, and they have a one-for-one model as well, and they're a for-profit business. And I wanted to create a business that had good ingrained in the model
Uh,
instead of a nonprofit that was relying on donations of some sort.
yep.
And I think it honestly kind of helped me realize, and one of the things that I love to like just tell people is that you shouldn't have to choose between making a living and making a difference. You know, you
Mhm.
can do both at once. And I'm not saying that you can't make a living through nonprofits, but
Yeah.
I think that it used to feel like there was a choice. Either I'm
Yeah.
going to do something meaningful and not get paid, or I'm going to do something that's not meaningful and get paid. And I like to tell people that you can find a lane that does both. And that's what I feel like I did with Headbands of Hope, but it definitely took a lot of trial and error to try to figure out what the model was.
Yeah. Now, if I understand correctly, I would love to say that Headbands for Hope just had this meteoric rise from day one. But if I understand correctly, the first order maybe didn't even go the way as planned.
Yeah.
Talk about the early days and the getting the momentum behind the idea.
Yeah, I remember, 8 a.m. My website's live the first day, thinking it was just going to be like flood of people, and the first order was from my mom at like 8:30, and then the
Go,
second
mom.
order, yeah, go she's still our number one customer. Second order is from my grandpa, and like after he called me to figure out how to work the website. And so I think, a lot of entrepreneurs or people who have reached some level of success love to share the idea, seed, and then where they're at now.
Yeah.
And it kind of does this disservice to people with ideas or dreams that there's no like in the middle. It
Yeah.
just makes people feel like, well, I should have this idea and then it should work. And that's rarely the case.
Mhm.
So I like to be pretty transparent that it took a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of mistakes to get to where we eventually became.
Yeah. Now, one thing to your point, I think you hear people start a business and then you see them at the mountaintop moment. But one thing I'm always curious about in a journey is there's oftentimes those one or two, whether it was clients, customers, events
Mhm.
that you're like, okay, like there's something to this. It's not just my mom and my grandpa buying our
Mhm.
product, right? Like there is this outside that has no idea who Jess is, but is doing it because they like the business model.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about, one or two of those stories where you really felt like, all right, there's momentum, there's progress here, for a real business opportunity.
Yeah, I felt like I remember, and I'm sure almost every entrepreneur remembers the first time they got an order from someone they didn't know,
Yeah.
and or the first listener or something from
Yeah.
someone you don't know. And it was this blog called Healthy Tipping Point wrote a blog post about us. And that was like the first day I got an order from someone who had read that blog and went and bought one. And it was such a moment where you were like, oh, this is working. Not because someone was just trying to make me feel good or a family member was trying to support me, but someone out there who has no connection to me made the decision to use their money and buy the thing that I was selling.
Yeah.
And that was a real like fire under me to be like, this is working. Maybe it's not working at scale right now, but it's working.
I love it. So, as you use the term scale, as you did grow and scale, I think that's even a different element of business ownership, right? One step
Mhm.
is getting an idea, getting traction. Step two is then, well, how do I grow this? Because, well, I can't do it alone, or I can't have, a couple friends help me periodically. So, talk a little about the growth and the scaling of your business.
Yeah, I think, the way that I was able to scale it was, this way that I didn't realize was gonna lead to a whole other career, was through speaking. I would
Yes.
just, like, beg college professors for 5 minutes a time before class, "Can I speak about what I'm doing?" And then learned that if I can get good at that, then I can get 10 minutes a time, and then if I can not just make it about me and what I'm doing, but also some takeaways for them, then
Yeah.
I can stretch that out into 30, 45 minutes an hour, and this is something that people actually pay for public speaking. And so that was how I was able to raise awareness for the business was through speaking, and then it was also how I was able to fund it because the money I would make through public speaking, I would put it back into the business, and then when Headbands of Hope got acquired, in 2021, that was what started my next venture, Mic Drop Workshop, which helps women become professional speakers.
Yeah.
But I think, like, there's so many things you can do to scale your idea, but figuring out, like, what is the thing that you like to do or,
Mm,
and for me, it was storytelling.
yeah.
That was helpful than trying to do everything,
Yeah.
just picking one thing.
Now, I I think it's interesting that you use the storytelling phrase because I think so many people want to sell their product for how good it is or how much different it is
Mhm.
than other people. But the reality is, a lot of people love that idea of buying into the story, right? And talking through that. So, talk a little bit about how you created your different speaking engagements and how you went through and said, all right, this seemed to connect with people, or all right, I
Yeah,
gave this 5-minute speech. I think I saw half
didn't
the people
work.
fall asleep.
Yeah,
Like, right here,
yeah.
we got to revamp this and come up with a new story to help people buy into what we're talking about.
I think, when I first started speaking, we all have this, like, preconceived notion around speaking that it is, like, to look and feel important when you're up
Mm,
there. And so I went up there trying to be impressive and be important to people, prove my credibility. And so when you do that, you kind of just are, like, telling your highlight reel
yeah.
or regurgitating you heard something that Mel Robbins said and, uh, trying to almost impersonate what you think a speaker is rather than being yourself. And so I think that in the early days when I was just trying to appear impressive, it wasn't landing.
Mm,
And then I remember one event or like a speaking thing I did at just like a college classroom for an old professor. It was like one of those stereotypical rough days of, like, it was raining, I forgot my umbrella, I got a parking ticket that day, just like there was 12 kids in the class, half of them were on their phones or eating lunch or something. I was like, "Oh, man, I really don't wanna do this." And that was when I kind of dropped the whole talk show
mm,
personality of what I thought speaking was, and instead was just honest because I just didn't really have the energy, to be frank.
yeah.
And so I talked about how I got a loan stolen from a fraudulent manufacturer. I talked about imposter syndrome that I felt and how, I did it anyway. Um, and then that was the speech that clicked, to those 12 students in the room who I
Yeah.
saw put their phones down, put their sandwiches away, stay after to talk.
Yeah.
Um, and so it really changed the way I thought about speaking.
Yeah.
And it's like not about making me look good. It's about how do I help them get to where they want to go. And sometimes that means not looking good.
Yeah. Well, and I think something, someone listening right now is sitting here saying, "Gosh," and I'm sure you hear this a lot in, your mic drop workshops and, the speeches that you give. Gosh, I want to do what you're doing. I want to speak on the
Mm,
big stage. I want to, run a really large company. And the hard part is they didn't see you speaking to 12 college students on a
yeah.
campus on a day you didn't want to be there when it was raining and you had every reason not to go, but you showed up anyway. And there may or may not have been a single sale that came from that class, right?
Mhm.
But you were there. And so talk a little bit about, being willing to do the unrequired things when you don't want to do them and how you never know what that leads to or, the confidence that it's going to bring to you. Oh man, that speech actually caught their attention. Like, thank
Yeah.
God I showed up and gave that speech today.
I always say, like, speak like the room is full. I remember during the pandemic, I was like just going on a bike ride to get outside and I heard this like megaphone. And so I biked over and I saw this woman who had a sign that said church service open to all. And she had dozens of rows of chairs that were set up like 6 feet apart in this parking lot. And there was maybe like three people in this whole audience. And she was speaking like she had a sold out arena.
Yeah.
And I loved it because it's like, one, you never know who's listening. And if you
Yep.
can just help one person, then that is time well spent.
Yeah.
Um, and also, it's even though you never know who's listening, every single rep that you get on a microphone is practice.
Yeah.
And so give it your best practice. Like, Steph Curry's not going to go out there and like airball some threes because it's just practice. No, he's going to give it his best shot. And I think speaking or any kind of opportunity is no different, that when you get the time, either realize that someone in the audience could be a game changer for you, or you can help one person, or recognize that like practice is practice. So show up like
Yeah.
it's a game.
I love that. Now, I think so many times we say things like, man, if this could help just one person, it would all be worth it. But then we're
Hmm.
comparing ourselves to the Joe
Yeah.
Rogans of podcasting. We're comparing
Right.
ourselves to the John Maxwell of sales of books. And you go, all right, how can these both be true, right? How can I
Mhm.
say it would all be worth it if I could help just one person? But at the same token, I'm kind of comparing to really what I dreamt this could look like.
Right.
And so how do you balance those two things? Because to put time, energy, and effort in, your hope is you do help more than just one, but you have to
Yeah.
show up as if, well, if I help just one, it would still all be worth it.
Right. Such a good question, because it's like you want to truly believe that all of the effort is worth it for like any amount of impact.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think also like becoming a parent, like having two kids now, has made me realize like my most precious currency is
Mm,
time. And
yeah.
how do I get time back? And so I'll be honest that I used to say yes to any coffee meeting or any student that wanted to pick my brain. Of course, I'll get on the, call with you or meet you, and or show up to any opportunity, because the impact was worth it to me. And now I realize, like, and it doesn't matter if you have kids or not, like, just that your time is so precious and valuable.
Yeah.
And so it's taken me some like readjusting as to how I uh weigh things and weigh
Yeah.
opportunities. Um and then I think like one of the things that has helped me is figure out, well, what is the certain group that I will like just say yes for, or the
Yeah.
certain cause, or the thing that is worth it. And so to me, it's young girls. So I
Mhm.
allot like a certain amount of time every year for like speaking engagements or things
Hey.
for young girl groups that that's like it's done, it's worth it to me. And so that way I also don't feel like I have to say yes to everything,
Yep.
because I have the thing that I know I'm saying yes to. So I
That's
think that
good.
could be helpful for people listening, is like just pick the lane that you know that the impact, it doesn't matter how big or small it is. And
Yep.
that way you can just focus on that instead of trying to be pulled in all different directions.
I love it. That's awesome. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Headbands for Hope was acquired.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden, you guys decide to do, what everyone would do when you sell a business, go buy the big house and just relax. No, talk about what
Sail
you
into the
guys decide
sunset.
to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I will say though, uh, one thing I did do, and I'm not saying like this was like
It's like,
oh, it's
what?
acquired, I never have to work again. It was not close to that, but it was something where it was like, okay, you reach a certain uh point where as a founder, I wasn't really paying myself that much. And then you do get like a sum of money and you're like, is there anything I want to like do with this?
Yeah.
And I decided I wanted to take my mom and my sister and my grandma on like a trip together.
Mm.
And I think about that a lot because there's like so many reasons to talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, well, it's a lot of money, or I could just start it, with my next business. And now that like my grandma, like there's just like everyone's aging and now I have kids and I can't really go anywhere at the
Yeah.
drop of the hat. I'm just so glad I spent that money on an experience. And so I just was thinking about that for like sometimes those moments where you do have the chance, like
Yeah.
just to take it. Uh but yeah, I started the next company called Mic Drop Workshop. I was seeing so many conferences that would have like one woman in the lineup, or I'd be that woman, or they would ask
Yeah.
me, we're looking for women speakers. We can't find any. I'm like, what is going on here? I know so many amazing women that would be amazing speakers. So I realized that there was just this gap in the market of like women not applying as much for events and not getting selected, not getting paid enough. Um, so I rented out like the bottom floor of this restaurant in Raleigh, North Carolina, and put up an Eventbrite. It was like, any women that want to learn the ropes of how to get paid to speak, come out here Thursday night. I'll have wine and cheese, show up. Um, the room was full of amazing
Nice.
women, and that became the first ever what is now Mic Drop Workshop, where we do it's mostly virtual now, although we do have some in person, but we help women speak with confidence at work and also get paid to talk on stages.
Amazing. So as you're having those conversations, are there any one, two, or three consistent themes that you're hearing specifically in the female space as to, you know, why they're not pursuing it as much? Or would you say after having done it, as long as you have, the reasons are similar across genders?
hmm It might be similar, but the thing that I would hear a lot from women is thinking that they had to reach this level
Mm,
of success in order to get started,
yeah.
and minimizing their story, or what do I know, or I need to have this accomplished before I can give advice. Whereas I didn't see men like having that same kind of like internal
Yeah.
discussion or dialogue, at least the men that were in my view. And
Yeah.
then not knowing like how to find events, how to price yourself. We had women that were like, quoting $500 or $200 to speak, that as soon as they took our program realized that they could be quoting like $20,000. They had a lot to offer. And so I think a lot of it too is just like the transparency around pay and how to do this that sometimes women weren't getting. Um, so I think it was a number of things, which makes, I think, what Mic Drop Workshop does is so cool. It's not just like a speaker training. It's a community that you can learn from other women, partner with them, realize like how women are finding opportunities, what they're getting paid. And so it can kind of elevate everyone at the same time.
Yes. Now, you also, as we talked about, have books, and if you're watching this, you can see them behind her. If you're
Yay.
listening, go find her books. But we'll start with Chasing the Bright Side. So talk a
Mhm.
bit about why you decided to, one, write a book, but two, then the idea behind the book.
I think, to write a book, I say this now, I'm like, you have to kind of be obsessed with a certain topic that you're
Mm.
so willing to not just go deep enough to write a book, but to also be with that topic for like 5 years and not get sick of it.
Yeah.
And so for
For
me,
me,
chasing the
chasing
bright
the bright
side
side
came
came from
from this like constant thread that I was seeing in my life, whether that was through like stuff growing up or through starting my business, that was like, we can't build good things for the future if we don't believe that the future is good. And so we have to be willing to have this kind of like sometimes what feels like delusional optimism in order
Mm,
to figure out how we want to make it better.
yeah.
So chasing the bright side is about like training ourselves to be optimistic, not training ourselves to be happy, not training ourselves to always be positive,
Mm,
but to almost use optimism more as a strategy than a mood.
yeah.
Um, and that's what I've done, yeah, for the past 5, 6 years now. And then that turned into a children's book as well called Create Your Bright Ideas. It helps kids figure out like how they can start their own businesses or make an impact in the world.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. First, the simple answer is go buy the book for your kids. But if a parent's listening right now and they
Mhm.
go, I'm hearing how impactful it was for Jess to see her dad start a business because subconsciously it planted an idea in her head that, hey, maybe you should be okay with potentially starting a business someday. But they're saying, Jess, I'm not the business starting type. Like I
Uh,
like my employment. I like my W-2 job. I don't want to go do the entrepreneurial route. How are you encouraging parents to, be an example to their kids, or maybe just open their minds to what's possible outside of what they're seeing
yeah.
on a day in and day out basis?
Well, I will first say that being a parent right now, I hesitate ever giving like parenting advice because it is like the least one size fits all
Yeah.
thing ever. So all I can say is what I think about with my kids, is I encourage them when they try, not just when they
Mm,
do something good.
mm,
So, for example,
great.
my kids were like playing catch with my husband today and you know, just encouraging them. I love that you guys are trying to like play catch. I love that you're including your brother. I love that you're doing this instead of like just when they win or when they catch the ball.
Yep.
Um and then, like for example, the bubble maker that they had was broken. We couldn't, figure it out. Instead of just fixing it, I mean, like, I wonder what you think. How should we fix
Mhm.
this? Why do you think the bubbles aren't coming out? And of course, sometimes it's like, I just want the bubbles. And it's not this like big, Barney Sesame Street moment that
Yeah.
you think of with rainbows. But sometimes there is like, you see their critical thinking brains working.
Mhm.
And so what I am trying to do is encourage them when they try, not just when they win. And then also try not, this is so hard for me because I'm such like a problem solver. Uh that just try not to solve their problem immediately and instead be alongside them as I
Yeah.
think of it. Like watching my daughter try to twist the lid on her drink is like I'm literally sweating watching her do it because I just want to turn the lid.
Yeah.
But I'm like, she's got to figure it out. And I just sit there as milk spills all over the floor as she's trying to like turn her cup. And so I think those are the two things that I'm working. It's not about starting a business, but it
Yeah.
teaches them the trying and the critical thinking of it.
I love it. That's great. So let's talk about the newest book coming out, Making It Without Losing It.
Mhm.
Once again, so you've got the business side of things that you started a business, exited a business. You started a next business. You've written books. You speak frequently. So talk
Mhm.
a bit about why this new book, and then also the story behind it.
I think that we sometimes like write the things that we need the most. And this was
Mm,
something I needed the most,
yeah.
where throughout my career so far, I kept thinking like the next thing I accomplish is going to be the thing that makes me feel like I've made it, the
Yeah.
thing that makes me feel whole. Or maybe for you, it was like once I can get a certain amount of podcast episodes or downloads or something like that. And then you hit that marker or something and you're like on to the next.
Yeah.
And I felt like no matter what I achieved, I was always at a deficit.
Mm,
There was always something else that needed to fill it. And so, although it was making me super ambitious, it was also robbing me of my joy.
mm,
Uh, and so I kind of started this quest of like, can we be ambitious and still feel that deficit, like we have more left to
yeah.
accomplish, and be happy with what we have? Or are those two things mutually exclusive? And so that's where Making It Without Losing It came from, was like kind of my journey in discovering how can we be like forward thinkers, never ending, always something next, and enjoy that. Gamify it, like, have a good time while doing it. Because I just kept finding myself being, like, just disappointed,
Yeah.
or frustrated that no matter what I did, it wasn't, like, enough for the feeling. And then I realized, like, I'm in control of the feeling. And, what if we didn't have to trade, like, productivity for peace? They could be things that are done at once. And so that's what making it without losing it is about.
So, as you say that, where my mind goes is a problem that I'm guilty of is I'm a very forward thinking person. So I like to have like a 5-year vision.
Mhm,
And I mean, you go, gosh, 2030, like that's so far away. And then oftentimes I don't update it as frequently as I should. And
mhm.
so goals for who I was 5 years ago
Yeah.
was a really big mountaintop thing, right? But then all of a sudden, 3 years in, maybe I developed quicker, or this business opportunity came up, probably sooner than I thought it could have when I wrote
Mhm,
my goal 5 years ago. And so, really, all of a sudden, by the time I hit my goal, or I'm reflecting back on it after 5 years, I go, man, that wasn't, as exciting as what I thought. And I think it's because I was reading it as someone that had 4 more years of growth and experiences, right?
mm,
Not somebody that was lacking that 4-year gap between when I wrote it and when I
yes.
accomplished it. And so I think sometimes, that long-term vision or goal, once again, had you told yourself 5 years ago you would have had it, clearly it was exciting because that was what I wrote in my vision.
Mhm,
But now that I'm here, I don't feel as excited about it because of the growth and development that's happened along the way. So I guess my question there is, as people are writing goals and thinking about their next steps and what they want, how can they check in on it more, maybe more frequently, to
mhm.
say, hey, yes, I can understand where I was at when I wrote this, but now that I'm here, I should be proud of where I'm at and not losing the enthusiasm for accomplishing this goal.
Yeah, that's so insightful hearing that from you. And also, I think sometimes you have these 5-year goals and not just like, "Oh, I reach it," and, but also just your interests change. Like, you
Yeah.
change as a person. I remember thinking like, "I wanna get a Netflix show with," and do this thing, and now I'm like, I could not think of anything less that I want than to be on, like, TV all the time or have cameras following me.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, like, when we have such fixed goals, it gets in the way of possibility.
Mm.
There are so many things, like, I didn't even know public speaking was a profession. And
Yeah.
yet, not only is it my profession, I'm teaching people how to make it their profession. Like, I'm all in. And if I had just said, no, I'm going to be like this, then I would have missed this, like, huge window of opportunity. I do. So I'm not saying that not to have goals, but I'm
Yeah.
saying to, like, hold them with a, like, open palm instead of a clenched fist, and just be
Yeah.
open to see where you land. The one thing that I am interested in is, like, more lifestyle goals, that to work towards. Like, for me, it's taking not working Fridays, so I can have another day, with my kids.
Yeah.
And so that's a goal that, I think impacts my lifestyle rather than being like, I need to hit a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
And it's also goals that are, like, within your control. For example, you could say, I want to do 1,000 podcast episodes. But instead of being like, well, I want to be in the top 10
Yep.
podcasts, you can control the output, but you can't always control, like, what other people will think, feel, or do. And
Yeah.
so I always try to say, like, is it something that's within my control? And, or is it something that impacts my lifestyle? Like, those are goals that are interesting to me.
Yes. Now, as you're setting goals, do you have a process that you go through in regards to, like, hey, it's, the two of you talking through your goals and making sure that you're in alignment as a couple? Do
Hmm.
you have a board of directors where you're saying, hey, these are the 5 closest people in my life, and I share with them what I think I want to accomplish, and then I get feedback from them of,
Yeah.
well, why do you want that? Or, really deep diving, or how do you go about setting your goals, now that it's not just a single Jess, right? It's not just a
Yes,
what
yeah.
you want, right? I mean, there's a family dynamic, there's, kids. I mean, there's a whole bunch more that plays into if it were just your goal versus, well, I'm taking into account
Yeah, a unit.
everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Something my husband and I started doing this year, he saw it like on Instagram or something, was called State of the Union, where him
Mm,
and I go away for like 2 to 3 days, and we had, what are our personal goals? What are our financial goals as a household? Where are we at, financially? How do we wanna, uh, if we have, something that we want to spend on, making sure we do that together. And that was so helpful to do that as kind of like a compass for the start of our year.
yeah.
Uh, don't tell my husband because he takes too much credit for that idea, but, so
I'll
that's what
just
we do
find the
kind of.
Instagram reel that says it, and I'll send it to you,
Yes,
like, "All right, see, that
exactly,
wasn't you.
exactly.
Here it is."
Yeah, so as a family, that, like,
Yeah.
State of the Union where we can just look all instead of, like, trying to jump in and out of these conversations in between bedtime and stuff, um, and then as a company, we do something similar every year where we do, like, an end of year recap and what's ahead, but we do, like, these quarterly, um are we at where we thought we were gonna be at this time? And
Mm,
if not, what are the levers that we need to pull or things that we need to change, or do we need to adjust the goal?
yeah,
Uh, Admittedly, that's not the way I operate. I'm a much more, like, creative brain than I am a logic brain.
yeah,
And so it was really helpful for me in my business to realize that and that I needed logical people on my team. Um, and so, like, hiring people that are make up for what you lack is really
yeah.
helpful in goal setting too, if
That's
you have the ability.
yeah. Now, the second side of the book, without losing, contentment or
Mhm.
enjoyment of what's happening, I think for especially, a high achiever like yourself, you go, well, if I become content with where I'm at, does that mean I won't ever reach my true full potential?
Right.
And I think there's two elements to that where people can reach discontentment. And that is if you try and reach your full potential in an area of your life that's not your real priority. I think sometimes I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, so we've got Warren Buffett, and he's a very successful businessman, right? I mean, a multi billionaire. Everyone knows about him. And yet, at the same token, for a period of time, there really wasn't a great relationship with his kids. And you go, well, if
Mm.
you're going to be one of the best businessmen in the world, unfortunately, it probably takes a time sacrifice that then leaves a void inside of certain relationships in your life. And so
Yeah.
I guess, the question I have there is as people are trying to figure out the content piece of it, right? Or, finding enjoyment with where they're at, but not losing the desire for getting to
Mhm.
their true potential in the area that they prioritize.
Yeah. Such a great question. I love the Warren Buffett, thought around it too. That was my fear, was like, if I'm happy, does that mean my business will suffer? Which
Yeah.
is so crazy to think about it that way. Or does that mean my career will suffer if I'm not hungry?
Mm,
And I think that the quote solution to having both is to love the game. Like,
yeah.
someone like Tom Brady doesn't need like another Super Bowl ring, or like Will Ferrell doesn't need another like hit. But why did Tom play for so long? Like, why does Ferrell keep making movies? It's not because they need one more thing. It's because they truly love the craft and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I get that you can't, sometimes people are like, well, I just do this or I just do that. And, but if you can connect like what you do to why you do it, which is what
Uh,
I love to help people do, there's a way that it doesn't become about like getting the next achievement or the next like gold star. It becomes about pursuing a passion or a purpose, which that is far, like, studies show that's far longer lasting
yeah.
than checking a box.
Now, talking about passion and purpose, and, really, I think some of that encompasses identity. so many people that exit a business have a tough time when they exit a business because it's like, well, I'm losing a
Mhm.
part of me, right? Like that was this thing that was so important in my life. And as you have pivoted into so many different roles and we'll say identities, how do you kind of have your true north star of who Jess is, not what she does?
Mm. Yeah, because that was definitely tough when I exited Headbands of Hope, like, wondering, like, did I just lose me? Did is this, like, I was so my self-worth was so clearly tied up into the performance of the company, which is
Yeah.
a really slippery slope to have your self-worth
Yeah.
tied into, like, any sort of performance at all. And so I think now I actively am trying to build a business that can survive without me.
Mm,
Um, and then also realizing, like, uh, I am not the, like, center of people's universe. Like, people are not actively thinking about me, which is great news, which gives me permission to, like, try, experiment, act more like a scientist than an expert. Like, a scientist isn't
mhm,
wanting to, like,
mm,
be perfect at everything.
yeah.
It's that they want to learn through experience and experiments. And so I feel like I, instead of trying to be this, like, perfect person, treat things more like a science experiment. Um, and so therefore, like, mistakes become fascinating. Although they hurt and
Yep.
aren't fun, it becomes like, you're dissecting the frog and figuring out how it works and how it, operates.
Yeah. Now, as you've progressed through your career, are there any one or two people that stand out as real like role models or,
Mm.
people that gave guidance? And I know we've talked about your family, your husband, but are there
Mhm.
any people outside of that kind of original close inner circle that really, I mean, ended up showing up and being like, wow, because of them, I learned a bunch, or this is a person that is always able to give me tough love and feedback that I really take
Mhm.
it to heart and am willing to make pivots because of.
Someone that I watch from afar who I've never met, who I really admire, Sarah Blakely, the
Mm,
founder of Spanx.
yeah.
And I love how she is, like, the definition of, like, making it without losing it. She is so able to be ambitious and have fun at the same time.
Yeah.
But someone who's been really impactful to me, who is a previous podcast guest of yours, Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why he has been so impactful is, like, there's a lot of people out there that are more than happy to give advice. And then there's not a lot of people out there that are more than happy to, like, give opportunity and
Mm,
connection, which is where I think especially women need, is
yeah.
the introductions, the, like, "Hey, you should bring her to speak." And he is so amazing at, um, not just like, "Here, you should do this," but, "Here's an opportunity, and I'm going to connect you with this person."
Yeah.
And I've been looking at that a lot, and it's called, like, the difference between mentorship and sponsorship.
Mm,
There's a lot of, like, opportunity for mentorship, and I'm not saying that mentorship is bad by any means, but we definitely need more sponsorship to be able to
yeah.
close some of these gaps, and Jordan does that for sure.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
Jess, I want to say thanks so much for hopping on and sharing your journey and all the amazing things that you've done. And I'm excited to see what you're going to continue to do. And we'll probably be doing this again in 5 years. There'll probably be another book that's coming out, maybe
Yeah,
a next business, who knows? But
we'll see.
everyone, yeah, everyone listening, go get and pre-order your book, but making it without losing it. And then for sure, go and check out her previous books as well. So, Jess, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me.